Welcome to the Filmed Live Musicals podcast, a podcast about stage musicals that have been legally filmed and publicly distributed. The Filmed Live Musicals website contains information on nearly 200 musicals that have been captured live. Check it out at filmedlivemusicals.com. And now, on with the show. This week's guest is dancer and choreographer Barry Busby. Barry has performed and worked as associate choreographer at theaters across the United States, including Lyric Theater of Oklahoma, Muni, Paper Mill Playhouse, and the Kennedy Center. He was the associate choreographer on the off-Broadway productions of Piece of My Heart at Signature Center, and 2 musicals in the City Center Encore series, Call Me Madam and Hey, Look Me Over. Barry was associate choreographer and dance captain on the Broadway musicals Honeymoon in Vegas, Sunset Boulevard, Tootsie, and the filmed live musical Holiday Inn. Welcome, Barry.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining today. How did you become a dancer?
I started dancing from a very early age. I was, I think in 3rd or 4th grade. How old are you then? I don't even remember, but I definitely remember it was like the end of 3rd grade going into 4th grade. I did this camp, and it was like a summer camp that my mom put me in, and it was for 3 weeks, and each week you did something different. So like the first week was like, I don't know, you're on the newspaper team and you're making a newspaper. And the second one, I don't even remember, but the third one was definitely a performing one. And the lady at the end of it, we did a performance, and the lady told my mom, you need to get him to this school. So my mom ended up taking me to the school that this lady, I don't even know her name. I wish I knew her name now. It's to this place called HITS, which is in Houston, the Houston International Theater School. And I went and saw a performance of theirs, which was all kids, and they didn't have the rights to Cats. So they called it Cats, Cats, and More Cats, but it was Cats. And I instantly was like, I have to do this. So then that kind of that gave me the bug for theater, at least. And then just right after that, like the head of that program at HITS was like, you should be in dance, you should be taking all sort of idioms. And so I definitely, I was like, Mom, I have to take dance. That's what they tell me I have to do. So I started, it was right around then as well. It was probably 4th grade. I started with tap and ballet, and then I would do all the jazz classes, and but I would go to the studios and I'd be like, I don't want to do any recitals, I just want to learn. I ended up doing some recitals. Yeah, that's kind of how it started.
Why didn't you want to do the recitals?
There was something, because I was always like, I want to do the hits shows, I want to do the musicals, and the recitals were like, I'm there to dance and gain and train, and get as much knowledge and soak that in, but I don't want to take away from my rehearsals for the other shows. So I was already wheeling and dealing at that age. But I ended up, like loving the recitals and having a good time. I also think like back then there was a stigma with being a boy. I mean, I was probably one of 2 boys in the whole studio of hundreds of girls. And, there was this, this is a long time ago now, I won't say how long, but, there was a stigma too. I'm sure me as that little boy was like, I don't want to be seen in a recital and things like that, which like today, which is so amazing. There's so many more opportunities, and these dance programs are so more, they're evolving so well that, that would be kind of a welcoming scenario these days. But back then it was not. So I'm sure there was that element too, not to get too deep into it, but, but also like, I just didn't want to miss rehearsals for, I don't know, Oliver.
The musical is your main priority.
Yes, it was.
What brought you to New York?
So also growing up, I was a competitive swimmer, and eventually there came a point I could not do both. I could not maintain the practices and going to rehearsals or training for that. So I chose theater, of course, and but too much of my dad did not want me to do that, but now he's like all on board and doesn't think about swimming at all. But I knew once I started training that I was like, I have to go to New York. I mean, that's the mecca for like musical theater. And fortunately enough, my mom and dad were wonderful growing up, and we traveled a lot, and we would come to New York, if not once a year, twice a year.
Wow.
And we would just go, and even if it was for 3 days, I'd see 6 shows. I'd see, or, if there was a matinee in the evening, I would go, and we would just jam pack, and my brother would like drag his feet to go see all these shows, and he would do his stuff too and go to the baseball stadiums and stuff. But I was fortunate enough. So like, I think my first trip to New York was 6th grade, and we went every year since then. And I was like, I have to be here. Like, I have to be here. So like, it was kind of ingrained in me very early on. So when I went to the University of Oklahoma for musical theater, my mom was like, and I was like, I'm going to move to New York. And she was like, what? No, you can't. And I was like, you put this in me. You know what I mean? Like, you set this up. You set the stage, for lack of a better term. And so, and then now, they love coming up here. And so I knew I was coming to New York very early on. It was the only option.
It is, like you said, it's Mecca.
Yeah.
Theater Mecca. When you were growing up, apart from coming to New York, were you watching musicals, like movie musicals or musicals on screen, as to fill the gap in between coming to New York?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a huge musical watcher as a kid, like especially on the movies. I mean, I love Singing in the Rain. Like, I would play that and like wear that VHS tape out. I was oddly obsessed with Starlight Express as a kid. It's like, even one of my old AOL accounts, which is now a junk email, is like Rusty, who is that character in Starlight Express. And my brother made it, and I'm sure he was like, he loves Starlight Express, so I'll make it Rusty 454, whatever it is.
Were you listening to the cast recording?
Well, so here's another. So the Hits, the theater that did Cats, Cats, and More Cats. I wasn't in Cats, Cats, and More Cats, but the first show I did with them was Starlight Express.
Gotcha.
Which is, as a going, like I said, 3rd, 4th grader, and I played Rusty. And so I think that just stuck with me, that I just like that's what kind of like, that was the first seed in this musical theater growth. And I think that's just kind of stuck with me. And I've always had, that show has always held a special place in my heart. I know every lyric. And so like, I didn't really watch a lot of musicals on tape, like I said, Singing in the Rain, because like I was going to New York and I was seeing the shows and I wanted to see them live and I wanted to do them and I wanted to, but I've definitely seen the movie musicals and adore them, and I think I have much more appreciation for them now than I did as a kid, because I was just like, I just want to be in it. I don't want to watch it. I want to be in it.
Have you heard of the Starlight Express Theater in Germany?
I have. So another story, because my parents are amazing and I adore them. When in 5th grade, they knew I was obsessed with Starlight Express. So I got taken out of school. I didn't even know what it was. I mean, I knew it was my birthday in May, and I can't come outside, and my mom's car said Vegas bound. And that's when the Starlight Express company was in Vegas. And she took me out of school and we flew for the weekend. And we had like, I think it was like the whole theater was taken over. I remember it, but we were like kind of front row in it. And we saw Starlight Express in Vegas. My mom stayed. I went to bed. And I was like, Mom, I have to get their autographs. And I think Rochelle Rack was in that company. I have to look back. And she stayed and got like Rusty and Pearl and all their signatures for me, which are still in my childhood home wall. And but yes, I know about the one in Germany, because I'm like, I still, as a 35-year-old, I'm 35 now, would want to go and see it and like relive that. And that's like original stuff. Like that's been there for a minute.
Yeah. I wish they would record something there, because it looks incredible.
Oh, it's so cool. I mean, if they did, I'm sure that one's way better than what they did in Vegas. And Vegas was amazing. Like, they had all these ramps that went through and right past you in the audience. And like, I'm sure it cost like $3 trillion, which is why it probably didn't do too well here. But, and it's also a very specific show. It's very specific.
You need a lot of excellent ice skaters, rollerbladers, people that can move on wheels.
Yeah. Which is so funny, because when I did it at Hits, like we didn't do it on skates, and they had these like rubber band like little loops. They looked like they're like thick rubber bands, I don't know. And we would hook them to our belt loops and we would hold on to each other. And that was what made our train. And we would like run up. That's the one video, we have them all, but like that's the one video I have digitally because the friend that I did it with had it and put all of her videos that we did as kids. And I have it like on my computer.
I would love to see that.
Oh yeah, I'll send you a clip.
Yes, please. What led you from being a dancer and wanting to be on the stage to choreography?
Another thing, I kind of always knew that was going to be in the cards too, especially once I started to get older in college. I mean, as a kid, of course, like I said, I always wanted to be on the stage. I wanted to be center stage, all that stuff. But when I got into college, I kind of like, even my professor, who I was very close to, Lynn Kramer, was like, you're going to choreograph one day. You just have the mindset for that. And I think even our senior year, I was like, I don't want to be in the musical. I just kind of want to assist you and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, okay. So she let me choreograph 2 numbers and Anything Goes and our senior year. And I kind of just, I loved it. Like I loved the creativity. And I also learned when I went to New York. So I booked White Christmas kind of 3 weeks after I got there and the tour. And it's from connections that I knew, and I had worked in the summers for college and stuff like that. So I knew Kelly Barkley, and so I did that show for 3 years, for the holiday season. And I kind of, not just that show, but that kind of showed me in other ways that one, my body was getting really tired, doing 8 shows a week and all that stuff, and tapping and hard on your body and things like that. And I also started to see myself being like, I don't really want to do the show tonight. And I'm like, wait, that's not the kid in me that had that fire and had all that. And it didn't mean that I didn't love musical theater still. I think my idea of it was broadening in a way. I was like, well, I think I need to find a different facet of it. And so I had ended up doing, but with Dennis Jones, I did at Tuts, I did Meet Me in St. Louis, and we had a great working relationship. And I was like, I reached out to him afterwards, and I was like, if you ever need someone, I would love to assist you. I'm kind of, in between right now. And he reached back, and like, now I've been an associate for almost 9 years. So and I have learned through that as well that it's not that I don't love performing, because I still do have that fire as a kid, and I love being on stage. I don't like the 8-show week or like doing one track. I get really bored. And I pledged early on that I never wanted to be that person that was on stage. We've all seen them on stage marking and like miserable. Like that's not what theater is about. Go do something else. You know what I mean? Like that's unacceptable in my opinion. Especially for what the ticket prices are, and it's Broadway, or it's no matter where you are in the world. Like if you don't want to perform, no one's forcing you to do that. You know what I mean? So,
and there's 1,000 people lining up behind you to take that spot.
Yes. And so I never wanted to be that person. And I saw glimpses of it early on that I was like, oh, what's wrong? I'm like not feeling this. And like, then I started being his associate, and I started swinging, and I loved it. Like, that's where I was like, okay, well, this is where, not a lot of people say that, but I was like, this is where I kind of feel I still get to perform. There's a huge adrenaline rush, and I feel super creative because I'm never going to get bored with any sort of track. And so that's kind of how that all, this is a long-winded answer for your question, but like, that's kind of how it all sort of transitioned into choreography. I kind of knew that my senior year of college, that it was going to happen eventually. I didn't know how fast it was going to happen. And then I fell into kind of swinging as well.
Can you explain what being a swing is?
Yeah. So as a swing, you are covering everyone in the ensemble and principals sometimes, but your main duty is to cover, like, let's say there, Holiday Inn, there was 8 and 8, I believe. And, so we had 2 male swings and 2 female swings, and you would cover all of them. If anyone's sick, or if a person's bumped up to a principal track, and you go in for that track. And so, yeah, that's kind of rough version of what a swing is. They do a lot of things. It's the hardest job I think there is in this business. It's the most stressful job, but it's also really rewarding because you're kind of a superhero at the end. You know what I mean? Like as long as you've done your job, there's a lot of lead up to it. Like people in the ensemble, they go to rehearsal, they learn their track, and then they go home. Whereas like a swing goes to rehearsal, learns a track, but then they have seven more. Plus, it's like I know friends who have swung shows where they have 16 tracks and they're the only swing. That's not normal, but so the job is never ending until you've like literally ripped the band-aid from every track that you've done. And it's funny because I even find in shows like when vacations start to happen and things like if I'm in a track for like a week or two, I get that same thing that I'm like, oh, when am I going to do a new track? I'm like getting a little bored. I don't mark or anything by that, but I still have that in me, which tells me I'm like, oh, I'm in the right track because I know, there are also things about swinging that people should know that, it's not for everyone. Some people don't have that mind. They don't have that. I mean, I've been lucky enough to be associate as well for some of them. So, I kind of already know the choreography. It's secondary because I helped create it. But then there are also the elements that people don't think about that sometimes swings aren't on the cast album. Sometimes swings don't get to do the Macy's parade. Sometimes swings don't get to do all the publicity stuff or the fun things. Usually they do, depending on the producer, but sometimes they don't. So sometimes there's a little sting there and just a reminder that, you're not on stage. I don't feel that. I think I'm like, oh, okay. I've also been lucky enough that the producers have let us be a part of things. So I haven't really felt, except for the first show, we weren't on the cast album. You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, oh, that stinks. But, it's fine. Whatever. Like, but some people can't handle that. Like some people, that's just kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah. A lot of colored markers and a lot of grunt work and not much glory.
Well, when I first started, my first show I swung, which I was terrified because I had just never done it, I had binders and sticky notes and they were color coded and all these things. And then you go on, which like some people still need that. You go on and you're like, I don't have time to look through this. Like I barely have time. So now I have a super cut down version of that, which it's all like on 2 sheets and it's color coded. But it's all one place where I can see it. Mm-hmm. And, but yeah, when I first started, I had all the bells and whistles and like didn't use any of it.
Yeah. You mentioned on some of those shows you were associate choreographer. What is the role of an associate?
Associate's basically the right hand man, woman, whatever, to the choreographer or director. And you basically help, some people have different capacities. Dennis and I are very good friends and like best friends, and we work really well together. We can kind of complete each other's sentences, and like in rehearsals, like I would teach everything and he comes in and he'll tweak things. That's not the norm. A lot of other choreographers teach theirs, and then the associate's really just there to keep the charts and keep the numbers and all that stuff. So on top of being in all the pre-pro stuff and remembering the stuff just in case they forget, I would say in my capacity, because that's what I can speak to, we'd go into pre-pro and we create all these steps together. I create a lot with him. We're very hand in hand, and I remember it. I'm the one to remember it and teach it. And then once we get into rehearsals, I keep the charts, like I said, and make sure I know where everyone is at every time, because then once you get into tech, you're respacing and changing all those numbers. And then ultimately all those notes would lead to what they call the show Bible, which would be like what the producers would use for companies down the road, tours, whatnot, regional companies, international companies, things like that. But everyone's relationship with the choreographer is very different. I'd say mine is very unique, as Dennis and I are very good friends, and which can also butt heads sometimes because we are very close and very stubborn with each other. But we also 99% of the time are super loving, and we create a very nice room because I think we really enjoy being with each other. And we also dance very similarly. So that's kind of usually associates dance kind of like the choreographer because you have to they have to recreate your vision for you. And there are things that like we'll choreograph and I'm like, Dennis, that does not look good on me. You're gonna teach this. So I'll bow out and I'll be like, Dennis is gonna teach this because like and eventually I'll get it. But like, there are things that or there's things that he's like, I can't do that. You have to do that. So that's kind of associates in a nutshell, a Cliff Notes version, I'd say.
When you're in pre-production, how do you go about research? Is it using those show Bibles or are you watching films? How does it work?
Well, like research as in like if you were recreating a new show or are recreating an old show or doing a new show. So it's
Both,
like
yeah.
I can answer both. You know, it's hard because when you're doing like a revival or something, you kind of don't want to reference it, but at the same time the structure is there and that's what they wanted. You know what I mean? There's some things on the paper of like that's just how they wanted it and like that's the structure. You can kind of reinvent it and add some instruments, I guess, or things like that. But like for the most part, like you do want to maintain the integrity of the show and like what they fought for because building a new show takes a lot of blood sweat and tears, so you never want to like step on something or recreate it in a way that's like offensive. So I would say for us, like we've never done a revival, but like when we do regional shows and we go internationally and they're like My Fair Lady and like things that people know, Saturday Night Fever, Bye Bye Birdie, we were supposed to do at the Kennedy Center, which I can speak to like most recently. We had the idea of what Bye Bye Birdie is. Everyone knows that. That's definitely one that I used to watch. And, but at the same time, you want to kind of, without stepping on toes, like there are some things in that show, perfect example, that are a little dated, especially for 2020, and there are ways that you could just cut it from the show, I guess, or there are ways to like, is there a way to reconfigure it? Is there a way to make this more relevant and still be respectful to the writers originally? That also comes down to the estate and who owns it and like what you're allowed to do. Usually they're just like, just cut that number, like things like that. But so I would say like for those kinds of shows that you're kind of reviving the idea, a perfect example is like Dennis and I did like all new choreography for Chorus Line. First time it went to the Muni and then it went to the Signature. I wasn't able to help with the Signature production, but it was kind of the same choreography he and I created for the Muni. And that's daunting. It was a daunting, especially Dennis had done the tour and all that stuff. But it was interesting because Dennis knew all the original choreography. I'd never done the show, so I didn't really have any reference and I wasn't going to look. I knew the opening number because everyone's learned that combo. But other than that, I didn't really have any reference of actual, and he knew like, I know what this is, and he did it with York, like all these things. And I was like, so it was interesting working together because he would do something and I would do something which would have a different spin on it because I had no reference. So to answer that question about the revival, it's like, it's almost easier to not refer to it and then maybe look at it later to be like, are we in the ballpark? And usually it kind of is in the same because it's, the orchestrations are set, things like that. For a new show, you kind of have a blank canvas, which is amazing. I mean, Dennis and I've been lucky enough with Dennis to do like 3 original Broadway shows. So taking them from the ground up with like Jason Robert Brown and Yazbek and, even recreating like old stuff from Irving Berlin, for like all these classics that people know and love, but kind of reinventing them and things like that, where like you kind of can just throw whatever you want at the wall and see what works. You have a whole creative team that has opinions as well. And I will say not that there is one, but if there was, choreography is probably lowest on the totem pole. You know what I mean? Like because ultimately they're like, we need to cut something from the show, cut that 8 count, cut that, things like that, which happens often. It's not that it's not important, but it just ends up, your show usually comes out at 3-4 hours and you're like, we have to get it to 2. And everyone, so the blank canvas of that is kind of a really fun thing to approach, because you're not having to go on someone else's dance arrangements. You're getting in a room, which is one of my favorite parts of a new musical, is getting in with the dance arranger. So you have your orchestrator, and then you have a person that comes in usually and just does the dance arrangements, because they're like, I don't really know not that they couldn't do it, but they're like, get with the choreographer. You have a drummer, you have a pianist, and the dance arranger. And you literally, they're like, so in this 8, we're kind of telling this story. I can speak most recently to Tootsie. Like, we have these marquees, and Michael's going to point to them, and that's what he's envisioning himself as, playing these parts as Dorothy. And so we get in the room and we just move around, and it's a riff on what the song already sounds like. So you have a structure at least, and then they start to play these hits, and we're like, no, we want to hit there, we want to hit there, and like it's special. It's like it's a nice, and it's nice to like have that voice and be able to do whatever you want. At the same time, it's also hard to hone in, because you're like, we can do whatever we want. And like, I'm like, okay, well, we could be here all day on 1/8 count, which we've done before. But so they're very different beasts as far as those two scenarios, but both amazing. But yeah. Does that answer that question?
Yeah. So would that work in the rehearsal room with the dance arranger and the choreographer? That's all happening before the cast comes in.
Yes, that's all in that kind of pre-pro vein that you would. I mean, the dance arranger will still be there, and because you'll be like, oh, well, this once you start to run the show and stuff, especially once the cast is there, you're like, we need to rethink this. So we go to square one, or we put a new song, or we do whatever. But yes, that would mostly all happen in the pre-pro stage, and usually just the associate, the choreographer, maybe a few dancers, and you're kind of creating it on the spot.
How much of the show would be choreographed before the cast comes in?
Well, I think it depends on the choreographer. I mean, I know I've been in shows where like it doesn't feel like they thought about a step, but they're brilliant on their feet. You know what I mean? They're like, let's do this, let's do that. They've thought about it. They just might not have shared it. And then, we like to go in with a lot of material. We might not have like where they are on stage or what formation they're in, but we definitely have 8 counts and things that we can pull from here and there, and ideas. I mean, in pre-pro for Tootsie, like we had like full numbers ready to go.
Wow.
Because we would, if you're lucky enough, if the producers are generous enough to give you time, usually the dance department has workshops or dance labs, and ours was 2 weeks, but then we had another one, and you're paid, all the dancers are paid, and they get their health weeks, and it's 10 to 6 nonstop dancing all day, so it's brutal. And we would create whole numbers with the amount of people that we would have. It wouldn't necessarily be the people on the show. Auditions might not have even happened. You know what I mean? It's just there to like kind of create, which is fun for the people who weren't in the show, because they can come see it. Like a lot of them had other shows, and they're like, oh, I can't even come in for it. But, they would come see it, and you see like how that came to life, or how it morphed. Because there were definitely some things that were in that April lab for Tootsie that made it to Broadway almost a year and a half, 2 years later.
Wow. So you're creating like the vocabulary, and the choreography is not set, but it is created well in advance.
Yes, it's definitely malleable. Like it's not, nothing's like, we're never like, oh, this is in stone. I mean, there are some things that we love, and we're like, we just don't want to get rid of this. This is so good, like blah blah blah. I mean, to us, it might be terrible. We think it's good. But we hold on to it as much as we can. It's like Holiday Inn specifically. I remember going down the street to buy the jump rope, like the original long rope for the 3 to tap dance in at this hardware store down from Ripley Greer. Dennis was like, let's go get a rope or something. And I was like, so I got there. It was like not even like a jump rope. It was like
a rope.
rope. And that has stayed in the show since. And that was way back. I don't even remember what year. It was before it went to Goodspeed, and then way before the Muni and way before Broadway.
So let's jump across to Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the development of the jump rope number? It's when in the filmed live version from Studio 54, the crowd goes absolutely wild after that number. It's like a good minute or two of applause afterwards.
It's actually one of the most special times that I've had in my personal shows on Broadway or in theater. Because you can feel, I remember that first night that, because on our end, we're nervous that they're going to trip up, because like there's no saving it, especially the big rope. I mean, for Broadway, we did end up adding the individual ropes, which was like another iteration because we were like, it was almost like a safety too. You're like, if the big rope were to ever fail, which we had a contingency plan, but if it was we have these that can surge forward and you just move on, you know what I mean, and cover them.
You forget about it.
They never did. So
wow,
they were wonderful. I mean, those
ever in the whole run they never tripped.
I think once.
That's amazing.
There was once. But we did a rope call before every show, all the individual ropes, and that call every single show, just to get into the routine of it. Because honestly, the pressure with those two guys on the side, because it's not like you're just roping, you're doing two certain counts, and it hits the ground at a certain time. If one person's early, it's going to catch the heel. And we did, this numerous times. I mean, that I did not have to swing, but talk about that would be terrifying. But like I said, it started with Dennis and I were like, what do we do? Like, we have garland. Oh, Christmas garland. We're thinking of things in that time. And we're like, what if we jump roped garland? I was like, okay, I'm going to go get a rope. Gave me a $20 bill. And I went down the street, got the rope. And we didn't have the individual ropes at Goodspeed or at the Muni. And so, or were they at the Muni? I don't remember. And we just started jumping around, seeing what worked. And we started coming up with different rhythms and different things, and how you needed the rope people needed to plie with them so that you could see their feet. And like there were a lot of minute details, like when they needed to run in, when let's do two and let's have one run back in. And we kind of just like created this really special moment. Like it was I knew that day at leading rehearsal, I was like, oh, we have something really special here. And I hope the world gets to see it. And cut to that night, I think it was first preview. It might have been opening. You're always nervous. Every time I watch the number, no matter what, I'm nervous because I'm like, oh, but you feel it in the audience too, because they're like, oh my gosh, no, they're not. No, they're not. Because like we spread it, they're about to jump rope and tap dance. And you feel people sit up in their seats. I could feel it in Studio 54, especially in the orchestra and above when I would sit there. But like you feel them kind of raise up and sit to the edge because you're like, your heart just starts to speed up, which is great because the reward at the end, once they finish that and they go into the other ropes and things, the energy of that number was truly, it's so special and like so rewarding because the audience just like loved it. And it's like there's nothing but joy and in a number like that. And so does that answer that? It's like I could go on and on about it. I mean, there's a lot of things about it.
I wish that we were video recording because I wish listeners could see your face right now. It is just beaming.
Yeah, I mean, because it's one of those numbers that like I just thinking about it, and you kind of reminded me of it. It's been a couple of years now, but like, and watching the special on TV will be amazing, but the noise level of the cheers in person were like chills, just thinking about it, because like, yeah, I mean, it's a very special number, and it took a lot of iterations. It took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of figuring out, especially once Dennis was like, let's add some individual ropes. And I was like, okay. So I just started with a jump rope and I started creating like a, tap dance to these individual ropes. And the whole next iteration was like, how do we make these ropes look like garland but not mess them up? Because at the bottom they have to kind of be weighted, because if they're just like not weighted at all, you can't control it.
Right.
So we would measure the ropes to the people with how you measure jump ropes, and we would test them all, and we would do all, and like there's like garland and stuff flying everywhere at first, and we're like, okay, well, we need to go back to the drawing board and create something that will stay and it's going to maintain, and everyone has their own individual rope. No one shares one because they're just so specific. The swings all need their own ropes, everything. And yeah, that's like it's that's the one thing, like if people talk about Holiday Inn, they're like, can you teach us the jump rope? I'm like, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard. Yeah.
So it sounds like you were involved with Holiday Inn like right from the very beginning.
Yeah. I've been there since the first iteration of it, like coming to life, when I remember, forget what show Dennis and I were doing at the time, because Dennis and I now have done over 40 shows together, or projects and things like that. And I was doing something and I was running rehearsal, and he was like, hey, I have to go to this reading. I'm potentially doing the Holiday Inn, which we had known the director for a little while. We had worked with him, and they went. And so I went to the next one, or maybe I don't remember. Maybe I went to it and he stayed at rehearsal. But I remember seeing a reading and I was like, oh, this is, it's all those songs that you love and know. And like a lot of the songs have changed. So they brought in new ones once it got to New York. But
it was with Laura Benanti and
yes,
Rob McClure.
Yeah. And who were amazing too, and those have had iterations as far as casts and stuff too. But I remember watching it and I was like, oh, this will be a special show for people, because a lot of people have so many memories with those songs in general, and whatever version and then we kind of hit the ground running. Like I was supposed to be in the Goodspeed production, so I went to Goodspeed, helped put it all up, but then I couldn't do it because I ended up, this is a good thing. I ended up
I was nervous for a second there.
getting in Honeymoon in Vegas, and it was going to be my debut. So I was like, okay, well, I'll come to Goodspeed still and set it all and help, because I'd done all the work, which I was excited to be in. I was excited to do the show. But then, the cards didn't fall that way. And then, they hired another associate for the time being to go to the Muni, because I couldn't go to the Muni as well because of something. I don't remember what that was. And then it kind of all came back, because when I went to Broadway, like I had put in so much thought and time with the show that Dennis was like, I would love you to come back on board. And like, it just seems fitting that we should do this together, because we started it so long ago.
The style of dance and tap in Holiday Inn, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's classic Broadway. You know what I mean? There's homage to Singing in the Rain. There's homage. Like Dennis loves that kind of world too. Like he loved those movies, and it has a modern spin to it, because Dennis and I love a toe stand, and we love things that like you might not see in those movies, and different spins on things. But yeah, it's pretty classic Broadway. I love that kind of tap. I love all kinds of tap, but I definitely love the classic kind of, and there's a lot of things in those orchestrations and with those songs that if you started like doing crazy things, you're like, oh, this doesn't fit. So there's a weird, these don't melt well together. So yeah, it's pretty classic. And that's kind of where Dennis and I kind of live as far as tap in general. So it kind of spoke well to us, and felt natural to create all that. Yeah.
You mentioned the individual jump ropes for people. When you do a Broadway show and a tap show, do dancers bring their own taps, or do you just break in the taps provided by a costume?
You will get new taps for sure. Whether or not like for Holiday Inn, I chose to lend mine to the show because I had some that were so broken in that I was like, we had a lot of issues with the deck being very slippery in that production. So I was like, as a swing, I was like, I want to wear my own shoes. I know how they fit. I know what they feel like. You can paint them. They're crap anyway. So like, feel free to paint them. Feel free to do whatever you want. And I know a lot of people did that, but we also still got the new shoes. You know what I mean? You would have the shoes already. They were fitted and you just be like, these just really aren't working. I still have those shoes, the new ones, and I still wear them. I teach tap class in them, but I only wore them a handful of times in the show. So yes, everyone would get new shoes, and that's the norm. I mean, you wouldn't really have to offer your own. We just had to do that because the deck, and we wanted people to feel safe and whatever. And they pay you and they rent your shoes from you and whatever it is. But yeah, the norm would be to get your new shoes and break them in eventually, which takes some time. Like,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of time.
That's hours of rehearsal right there.
Yes. Yeah.
When did you find out that Holiday Inn was going to be filmed?
We found out, I think it was like September, October. They were like, we're gonna film this, and it's gonna be archived forever. And we were like, okay. And then you start to sweat because you're like, oh, the pressure. Like, what if the rope messes? I mean, they were probably gonna do multiple recordings, but you're like, you only think like, you got to get that good shot. You know what I mean? And they had all
also
these
that
cameras,
it was being live streamed.
I know.
You can't read.
And I was like, how many, for the final cut, they would probably be like, oh, they're going to have versions. But for this one, like, I don't know. There were so many cameras everywhere. It was like, it was exciting. I mean, once we found out, it's also rewarding for Genocide to have like they did such a good job. And
14
the
HD
shots
cameras.
are amazing. And like, it's just filmed so well. So to have that and to like be able to like sit and relive that, and like how much went into creating one 8 count is special. It's nice.
Were there extra rehearsals before the filming?
I think there were some extra rehearsals just for like if there was something that was in a different shot, we might need to like angle it differently. But for the most part, no. For the most part, it was like the show, like we're gonna figure it out around you. We're not gonna come in here and like restructure everything. I mean, I think there were a few things, but for the most part, no. They also have like I forget how many cameras. I mean, I think there were 4 in the orchestra, 3 upstairs, like and
I think it's 14 total.
Yeah. So it's like they had some off stage things like that. So they caught a lot of things. Like, no, we didn't really. I don't remember having to redo a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. So no, like substantial elements of the production were changed for the cameras.
No. That's pretty much that's the version. Yeah.
Did you or Dennis get to work with the film crew about how those dances would be captured?
Yes, I mean, I think there were definitely, it's like Macy's Parade or anything that you have to go into it and be like, so this is like, end of Easy to Dance With, the girls fall down and like it leads to Corbin or like what kind of, and they were great about asking us like what angle would be best here. You want a wide shot for the ropes. You want, you don't want to zoom in and miss the big rope. And they're thinking, you know what I mean? So like there were definitely, and they had seen the show leading up to that numerous times. So they knew their shot and what their angle was going to be and things like that. And I'm sure they're brilliant. They know exactly what they're doing. So they didn't really need a lot of input from us because it was like, they know what they're doing. Like,
yeah. David Horn has directed 1,000 of these at this point.
Yes, like they know exactly what they were doing. So, and the proof is in the final product. I mean, it's beautiful. It's stunning.
Yeah. How are the tap sounds amplified?
Well, a lot of the tap sounds, I know we had floor mics, and then we also, a lot of the ensemble wore, not all of them, but wore tap mics that you would lead down. So you can't do everyone because it's just like super expensive. But I think at least half of the ensemble, I forget the full number, had tap mics that you wear. So it's just like a mic pack, and you put it, and they just lead down to your feet, and you kind of they secure them. Usually, the women can kind of secure them in their tights, but for men, they secure them around the tap or around something. Um, and then there were, and of course, Corbin or any soloist had them, and then we had floor mics as well to catch everyone else. So I'm sure they would lead that through the feed. I don't know the logistics of that, but like they're pretty clear in there. They did it like that. But we that also on Broadway that came to like before they were even filming it, finding where the sound wasn't super tinny because a lot of those things can sound a little harsh and like it sounds fake. Or pre-recorded, which the sounds weren't pre-recorded. I mean, they are for like an album and things like that, of course, because like they're not taking the live feed. But yeah, we eventually found it for the show in general, and then I think it translated well to the recording as well.
It makes me have even deeper appreciation for what the sound designers are doing.
Yeah, yeah, because if you hear it like raw, you're like, oh, this sounds terrible. But then once you hear it out, you're like, oh, that's great. They really mixed this, and like it's sounds great.
Yeah, that's really incredible. Do you think that filming stage shows in the way that Holiday Inn was filmed will change the way that shows like that are created or staged?
Do I think it will change? Well, like changing their staging for the purpose of being filmed.
Well, if post pandemic more shows become filmed, there's this kind of sense that Hamilton and so much has been made available online because of the pandemic. There's this like changing sense in the industry that maybe filmed live stuff is viable and there's a market for it. Will that change how shows are created?
I mean, I think it's a great tool to have. I think there's also, it makes it accessible to people that probably would never be able to see it, or whether that be because they live across the world and they're not going to make it to New York anytime soon, or Broadway's expensive too. So it's like now it's at your doorstep, literally, and there's another side of that it's um, I don't know if I think Broadway HD kind of had the pulse of this a while back. They had already done a few shows before Holiday Inn, and you kind of see where you can have this library of these like pure like the pure like form of the show that is just like so beautifully shot, and they spend some money on this too. It's not like they're just taking their iPhone, you know what I mean? They're putting it all out there. The crane, there's all these things, and I definitely think it will change. And also like what's happening with the pandemic. When's theater coming back? This is the only thing we can really kind of hold on to right now. So I think to archive all these shows and let future generations and musical theater lovers, non-musical theater lovers, just whatever, kind of witness and experience these things is important. A lot of us are starving for art right now, and I'm excited. I was in the show and I'm excited to see Holiday Inn on the screen, just to relive it. So yeah, I definitely think, I don't think it will necessarily change the way someone approaches putting a show or producing it, because I think in hopes, like if you produced a good show, they're going to want to shoot it. You know what I mean? And, it takes a lot of work to put these shows up, no matter what it is, no matter small, large, medium, whatever it is. No matter what it is, it takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of work. And to have it archived as a kind of this like perfect time capsule in a way, because eventually it will be, is special. And you can always go to Lincoln Center and see those, but they're not shot like this. They're beautiful. but they're not shot like this. Those are for archival purposes, and it's a great thing to go see. But these are like, you get to be there because it's almost like you and I right now. I can see you, you can see them, you can see the reaction, you can see the things. So I think it'll definitely change the way the world gets to see musical theater. Whether or not it changes a producer's perspective, I'm not sure.
Very interesting. So we're going to wrap up here with some quick questions.
Okay.
You don't have to think about them too much. Whatever comes to mind, there are no wrong answers.
All right.
What is your favorite musical?
Cabaret.
Oh, interesting. What is your favorite, if you have one, filmed live musical?
Holiday Inn.
Good answer. The product of a filmed live musical, it's not exactly theater and it's not exactly a film. So what should we call it?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Oh, that's a good question. Come back to me.
Okay. Where do you
I'm the only
stand?
person, so you're going to come back.
Where do you stand on bootlegs?
Well, I think now with these things I'm against bootlegs because one, it's very distracting because we can see them recording. And two, I just think it's like the music industry. It's like, pirating music and all that stuff. It's the exact same thing. A lot of money, a lot of work went into these creations of these shows, and they should be done in the right way. Like Broadway HD, like the archival copies, like things, and I think in all fairness, the actors should know, like it's not cool, in my opinion.
What do you wish had been filmed?
Oh, I mean, like everything, like Starlight Express. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure there is a recording of it, but like this, like that, they would nail it. Like, Broadway HD, please go to Germany and just make one of the Germany company. You know what I mean? Like the way these cameras move now, and like the HD aspect, like it's just so thrilling.
Yeah,
so
the digital.
Go back to Starlight Express.
The digital has changed everything. It's you could have a camera on a person's on a skater's body and have the camera follow the track.
Yes.
I want them to film the Vegas version with little 10-year-old you sitting in the front row. What would you like to see filmed in the future?
I think if they have the means and the producers have the means, they should film everything. I think we should start archiving literally every single musical. And, just to have this at the fingertips of everyone, and including myself, like that you can go watch anything. I mean, of course, there's nothing that's ever going to replace live theater. That's palpable, and like you're in there and you're feeling it. But these are pretty darn close, so they should film everything.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
So Holiday Inn is available to stream on Broadway HD and also on PBS Passport. And where can we find you online, Barry?
I have a website, barrybusby.com. I don't know, I guess Google. I don't know.
Can we find you on Instagram or social media?
Yes, my Instagram is @BRBusby. And then, that's my social aspect.
And would you like to give BB Studio a little plug?
Oh yeah, my best friend Leslie Flesner and I @LesFles we've been since the pandemic started. I know Luisa can talk about it. We started teaching just to get ourselves moving, but also if anyone wants to move and dance. We started with 5 classes, and now we have over 13 to 16 a week. And which includes one each week that's like original choreography, and someone comes in from the show and teaches fun little steps from random shows.
Not just random shows, Mean Girls, Hamilton.
Random shows as in like we just choose randomly.
I see.
But yes, major random shows, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, come join us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Barry.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Filmed Live Musicals is a labor of love, and we'd like to thank everyone who makes it possible. Thank you to our patrons, Josh Brandon, Mercedes Esteban, Rachel Esteban, Jesse Rabinowitz and Brenda Goodman, Al Monaco, David and Catherine Rabinowitz, and Beck Twist for your support. If you'd like to support Filmed Live Musicals, please like and review on your podcast app. Find us on Twitter at Musicals on Screen and on Facebook at Filmed Live Musicals. If you'd like to support the site financially, you can find us at patreon.com/musicals on screen. No matter what level you are able to pledge, you receive early access to written content and early access to this very podcast. Visit www.filmedlivemusicals.com to learn more. Thanks for listening.